I've always been curious about the dark web. You hear stories, see videos, and read posts about it being this vast, terrifying underworld of the internet. You know, where you can find anything from drugs to illegal weapons. But there's more, so much more that's far worse. I was aware of the dangers, but that didn't stop me. Like any normal person, I thought I was smart enough to avoid the traps and snares hidden in the shadows. I never thought it would come back to bite me. It all started one Friday night. I was bored, sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone when I stumbled upon a forum dedicated to dark web experiences. The people there shared their stories and tips. I clicked on a post titled, "Never reveal your name on the dark web, even as a joke." Intrigued, I read through it. The poster recounted how they casually shared their real name during a conversation on a sketchy chat room. At first, they thought nothing of it, but it escalated quickly. Out of curiosity, I joined the same chat room. It felt like stepping into a different world. The messages were fast and chaotic, a mix of laughing emojis and serious threats. I saw people making jokes about snatching identities, trading secrets, and posting bizarre links that led to strange, glitchy videos. I felt a mix of excitement and fear, and part of me thought it was all just a game. At one point, someone asked for our names as part of a getting-to-know-each-other game. I hesitated. I remembered that post. I knew I shouldn't, but the urge to fit in took over. "My name is Alex," I typed, followed by a smiley face as if that made it okay. I felt a rush of adrenaline. After all, I was just messing around. But it wasn't long before the tone of the chat shifted. Suddenly, someone replied, "Alex, huh? Cute name." A chill ran down my spine. They continued, "I know a lot about you, Alex." I laughed it off at first. It seemed like a prank, but then they started dropping details. Where I lived, my job, even the coffee shop I frequented. I was stunned. How could they know these things? I tried to backtrack, claiming I was joking and that I was just being silly, but they didn't let up. Instead, they started asking questions that only someone close to me would know. I felt my heart racing. I exited the chat room, my mind racing with fear and confusion. But the next day, things got even worse. I received a message on social media from someone I didn't know. The account had no profile picture, just a string of random numbers. It read, "You shouldn't have said your name. You'll regret it." I froze. My gut told me this was serious. I felt exposed like a raw nerve. I quickly changed my passwords, locked down my accounts, and tried to convince myself that it was all a coincidence. But then the messages kept coming. They escalated from vague threats to disturbing images. One was a picture of my front porch taken from the street, and another was a close-up of my car parked outside. It was clear they were watching me, tracking my every move. I started to panic. I avoided going out, paranoid that someone was lurking around the corner waiting for me. My friends started to notice I was acting weird. They asked if I was okay, but I brushed them off, saying I was just stressed from work. I tried to carry on with my life, but I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I stopped going to my usual spots and even started working from home more. The isolation felt suffocating, but it was better than facing whatever was out there. I thought about going to the police, but what would I even say? Hey, I revealed my name on the dark web, and now someone is stalking me. I felt like a fool. It was my own damn fault, and I was scared it would only make things worse. The days passed, and the sense of dread only deepened. I stopped sleeping properly, tossing and turning with nightmares of masked figures and dark alleys. I even started hearing noises at night, scraping sounds outside my window, or what I thought were footsteps in the dark. My mind spiraled. Then, one evening, I sat on my couch scrolling through social media when I saw it, a video posted to a public forum with my name in the title. The video showed me, sitting in my living room, completely unaware. It was a recording from a hidden camera. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to comprehend how this was happening. I felt sick. My stomach twisted in knots as I realized they were closer than I thought. I slammed my laptop shut and locked the door, frantically checking the locks as if that would keep whatever was out there at bay. The reality of my situation hit me hard. I was in deep, and I had no idea how to get out. And then I remembered the warning from that post, the one I had laughed off. Never reveal your name on the dark web, even as a joke. I had become a target, a plaything for someone who thrived on fear and chaos. After that horrifying discovery, I thought I was going to lose my mind. I felt trapped in my own home, which was supposed to be my safe space. I spent the next few days in a daze, afraid to go out, afraid to let my guard down. I barely ate or slept, too consumed by the anxiety that clawed at my insides. The video haunted me. I replayed the scenes over and over in my mind, trying to remember if I had noticed anything odd in the days leading up to it. Had I seen anyone watching me? Had someone followed me home? In my state of paranoia, I decided to reach out to a close friend, Jenna. She was one of the few people I felt I could trust. I texted her, asking if she could come over. When she arrived, I forced a smile, trying to hide how shaken I really was, but I could tell she sensed something was off. I led her into the living room and shut the door behind her, almost locking the world outside. "Hey, what's going on with you? You look like you haven't slept in days," she said, concern etched on her face. I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. "I've been having some issues," I stammered. "You know, just feeling anxious and stuff." I wasn't ready to reveal everything, especially not the dark web stuff. I feared she would think I was crazy. "Anxiety? From what? Is it work? You can talk to me, you know," she offered, trying to reassure me. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed her the video. I watched as her expression shifted from confusion to horror. "Is this real?" she gasped, her eyes wide. "How did they get this?" "I don't know. I was messing around on the dark web and now this..." I could feel the tears welling up, frustration mixing with fear. Jenna's face was pale, and for the first time I realized how serious this had become. "We need to report this," she said firmly. "You can't just sit here and wait for something to happen. This is serious." I knew she was right, but the thought of involving the police sent another wave of dread through me. I had already convinced myself that they wouldn't take me seriously. "What if they just think I'm being paranoid?" I replied, my voice shaky. "Better to be paranoid than to do nothing," she said. With a heavy heart, I agreed to call the police. I made the call, my hands trembling as I explained the situation. The dispatcher asked for details, and I could feel my cheeks burning with embarrassment as I recounted my brief experience on the dark web. I could almost hear the disbelief in their voices. After the call, we waited for the officers to arrive. Jenna tried to keep the mood light, talking about mundane things, but I could see the worry etched in her features. When the officers finally showed up, I felt a sense of dread wash over me again. They were two men, both in uniforms that seemed to accentuate their authority. "Can you tell us what happened?" one of them asked, pulling out a notebook. I recounted everything again, my heart racing as I reached the part about the video. The second officer raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Let me see this video," he demanded. I handed him my phone, and he scrolled through it, his expression turning serious. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" he asked, looking up at me. "No, I don't know anyone who would..." I paused, suddenly realizing how vulnerable I had made myself. I was completely exposed. I just messed around on the dark web. They exchanged glances, and I could see the wheels turning in their heads. "We can't really do much without more information. We recommend that you change your privacy settings on social media and keep your doors locked," one of them said. Great, that was helpful. Once they left, I felt like the walls were closing in on me. I was grateful Jenna was there, but I could see the worry in her eyes, and I didn't want to burden her any further. As she left later that evening, I watched her walk away, feeling the weight of isolation settle back on my shoulders. That night, sleep eluded me again. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with thoughts of the unknown. I thought about the dark web, and what had seemed so innocent at first. I had been so careless, so reckless. Around 3 a.m. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. Something felt off. I listened intently, the silence of the night wrapping around me like a thick fog. Then I heard it, a faint sound, like a whisper. I sat up, straining to listen, my heart pounding in my chest. It was coming from outside. I froze, every instinct telling me to remain still. The whispers grew louder, almost rhythmic, but I couldn't make out any words. I crept toward the window, peeking through the blinds. My blood ran cold. There, standing under the streetlight, was a figure. They were wearing a dark hood, the face obscured in shadow. The whispers were coming from them. I couldn't tell if they were talking to someone or just to themselves. I stumbled back from the window, panic coursing through me. I could hardly breathe. I grabbed my phone, the thought of calling the police again flashing through my mind, but I couldn't take my eyes off the figure. Suddenly, they turned, and for a split second, I thought they were looking right at me. My heart raced as I ducked behind the wall, pressing my back against it as if it could somehow shield me from their gaze. I wanted to scream, to wake up from this nightmare, but all I could do was listen as they continued their low muttering. Minutes felt like hours. I finally mustered the courage to peek again. The streetlight illuminated the area, but the figure was gone. My mind spun in confusion. Had I imagined it? Had they been real? I wanted to believe I was just overreacting, but the lingering sense of dread told me otherwise. I sat in silence, terrified to move, until I finally collapsed on the couch, too exhausted to stay alert. I fell into a fitful sleep, nightmares plaguing me, images of the hooded figure haunting my dreams. I woke up in the morning, disoriented, hoping it had all been a bad dream. But when I checked my phone, I had a new message. It was from the same random account, the numbers staring back at me with a message that made my stomach drop. "I see you, Alex. You can't hide from me." That was it. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was spiraling deeper into a nightmare. I had to find a way out, but every turn I took only seemed to lead me further into the darkness. I had to confront this head-on, but the question loomed over me. What would happen if I dug too deep? What would happen if I revealed my fear to the very thing that wanted to break me? The next part of my story reveals what happened when I tried to fight back. I can't promise it gets better, but it's a ride I never expected to take. The morning after the chilling message felt surreal. I stared at my phone, half expecting it to start ringing, but it was just a lifeless hunk of metal in my trembling hands. My mind was racing, and a sick knot had formed in my stomach. The words "I see you, Alex" replayed in my head like a broken record, taunting me with the sheer weight of their meaning. I couldn't just sit around waiting for something terrible to happen. I decided I needed to take matters into my own hands. If someone was watching me, I needed to know who they were, and I was determined to find out. I pulled up the same dark web forum where it all began. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I clicked into it, but I knew I had to go deeper. I navigated through the threads, reading posts that ranged from harmless jokes to outright terror. As I scrolled, I stumbled upon a discussion about a group that specialized in tracking down individuals, people who had gone too far or had something to hide. The group's name was The Hunters, and the more I read, the more it sent chills down my spine. They had a reputation for hunting down people who had crossed them, and from the way they talked, it was clear they thrived on the fear they instilled in others. Some members shared success stories, snatching the identities of those they deemed worthy of punishment or worse, scaring them into submission. I felt a sick curiosity pulling me in. I had to learn more. After several minutes of searching, I found an invitation to join their private chat. It was risky, I knew, but I needed to find out if they could help me or if they were the ones I needed to be afraid of. I took a deep breath and typed out a request to join, pretending to be someone who needed protection from a stalker. I didn't expect much, but I hoped they'd let me in. Within an hour, I received a response. "Welcome to the Hunters, Alex. We know why you're here." The message sent a jolt through my body. It was like they had been waiting for me. As I entered the chat, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The members were a mix of shadows and anonymity, with usernames like Night Stalker and Ghost Watcher. I felt like I was in over my head, and every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn back. But I pressed on, typing a message. "I need help. Someone's been watching me." The responses came flooding in, a chaotic mix of sympathy and excitement. "What do you know?" one person asked. "Where are they located?" another questioned. I felt the urgency in their messages, the thrill of the hunt palpable even through the screen. As I explained my situation, I noticed one user named Predator kept replying. They seemed particularly interested in my story, asking detailed questions about the videos and my stalker's behavior. "It's a game for them," Predator wrote. "They want to see how far you'll go before you break." The realization sent a shiver down my spine. I had unwittingly entered into a twisted game where I was the prey, and they were all too eager to help me play. After a few exchanges, Predator suggested I take a different approach, an aggressive one. "Don't be a victim, Alex. Fight back. Reveal yourself to them. Show them you're not afraid." The idea made my skin crawl, but something about it was strangely appealing. It felt like a way to reclaim my power. I hesitated, weighing the risks. But the thought of being a pawn in this game was unbearable. The next night, with my heart racing, I logged back into the chat. I crafted a message, daring them to reveal themselves. "If you're watching me, let's see how brave you really are. Meet me where you first saw me." It was a stupid gamble, but I needed to shake things up. I hit send, and a wave of dread washed over me. The responses were immediate. "You're playing with fire, Alex," one user warned. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." But another chimed in. "This is exactly what we need. Let's flush them out." For the next few hours, I was on edge. My phone buzzed incessantly, each notification sending my heart racing. I watched the clock tick by, anxiety gripping me. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for someone to push me over. As the hour of the supposed meeting approached, I felt sick. What had I done? I hadn't thought it through. I was just a scared kid playing a game with deadly stakes. I grabbed my jacket and took a deep breath, telling myself it was just a stupid prank. I would confront them and then come home. I had to be brave. I stepped outside, the cold night air biting at my skin. I glanced around my empty street, the streetlights flickering ominously. I decided to head to the coffee shop where I often went, the place I had casually mentioned online. The thought of someone being there waiting for me filled me with dread. As I walked, the world around me felt unnaturally quiet. The only sounds were my footsteps echoing on the pavement and the distant hum of cars passing by. The anticipation gnawed at me, and every shadow seemed to stretch and loom, waiting to swallow me whole. When I reached the coffee shop, my heart raced as I stepped inside. The familiar smell of coffee and baked goods hit me, but it did little to calm my nerves. I scanned the room, searching for anyone who might be watching. The barista greeted me, but their friendly smile felt like a mask. I ordered a drink, my hands trembling as I fumbled with my wallet. "Are you okay?" the barista asked, eyeing me with concern. "Yeah, just tired," I replied, forcing a smile. I took my drink and sat at a corner table, trying to look casual while scanning the entrance. Minutes passed, and I felt the tension in my chest building. Just as I started to doubt my decision, I saw a figure enter the shop. My heart dropped as I recognized the dark hoodie. They stood at the door, scanning the room, their face obscured by shadows. Panic surged through me. I froze, my heart racing as I wondered if they were the same figure I had seen outside my house. They moved toward the counter, and I quickly ducked my head, pretending to scroll through my phone. I felt the weight of their gaze on me, and every nerve in my body screamed to get out. I needed to leave. I took a deep breath, planning to slip out the back, but before I could make my move, they turned, their eyes locking onto mine. A sick feeling flooded my stomach. I knew I had been discovered. They started to approach my table, and I felt paralyzed, unable to move. The moment felt like it stretched on for eternity, and the room around us faded away. "Alex," they said, their voice low and gravelly, sending chills down my spine. "You've been looking for me." My mouth went dry as I stared into their eyes, dark and hollow, devoid of humanity. I didn't respond. What could I say? "Nice to finally meet you," they continued, a sick smile creeping across their face. "I've been watching you for a while now." I bolted to my feet, knocking over my chair in a desperate attempt to escape. I dashed toward the door, adrenaline coursing through me, but before I could reach it, they grabbed my arm, their grip like iron. "Where do you think you're going?" they hissed, their breath foul and heavy. I wrenched free, feeling a rush of panic. I burst through the door and ran into the street, my heart pounding as I sprinted into the night. I didn't look back. I just ran, weaving through alleys and side streets, desperate to put as much distance between me and that person as possible. Every corner I turned felt like a death sentence, the shadows closing in on me. I didn't stop until I was nearly home, panting and drenched in sweat. The fear coursing through me was overwhelming, but deep down, I knew this was far from over. I made it home, bolting the door behind me, panting as I tried to calm my racing heart. I was shaken to the core, realizing that I had invited a monster into my life, and now they were hunting me. I could feel the walls closing in again, my mind spinning with the possibilities of what was to come. The darkness felt closer than ever, and I had to confront it. I needed to find a way to protect myself, but at what cost? I spent the rest of that night locked inside my house, the curtains drawn tight, every creak of the floorboards echoing like a warning bell in my ears. I replayed the encounter over and over, the hooded figure's cold grip still lingering on my arm. I was terrified of what they would do next, terrified that my reckless challenge had put me on their radar for good. Sleep came in fits, haunted by dreams of being chased through dark alleyways, the shadowy figure always just a breath behind me. When morning finally broke, I felt like a shell of my former self. I had expected the terror to fade with daylight, but instead, it only intensified. I felt watched, hunted, and that feeling clung to me like a heavy shroud. I couldn't stay cooped up any longer, so I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The air outside was crisp, and for a moment, I let the normalcy wash over me. But as I strolled through my neighborhood, I couldn't shake the sensation of being followed. I glanced over my shoulder repeatedly, half expecting to see that same figure lurking in the shadows, but nothing ever materialized. It was as if the world had returned to normal, and I was the only one aware of the chaos brewing beneath the surface. That evening, I returned home, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. I had convinced myself I was safe, at least for now. As I stepped into my house, a wave of familiarity hit me, but it felt tainted. The walls seemed to close in around me as I locked the door behind me. I settled onto my couch, staring blankly at the television, the flickering images doing little to distract my racing thoughts. Then it happened. My phone buzzed, cutting through the silence like a knife. My heart raced as I picked it up, a new message blinking on the screen from that same unknown number. My stomach twisted as I read, "I know where you've been. You should have stayed inside." Panic surged through me again. I was being stalked, not just watched. I needed to find out more about this person who had twisted my life into a living nightmare. I went back to the forum, my fingers shaking as I typed out a plea for help, desperate to find someone who could give me answers or help me figure out what to do next. The responses poured in, a mix of sympathy and warnings. "You've got to get out of there. They won't stop until they have what they want." But what did they want? I felt like a puppet dangling on a string, and I was the one pulling it taut. One message caught my eye, though, from someone named Wraith. They claimed to have had a similar experience and offered to help me in exchange for information about my stalker. "Meet me at the park," they wrote. "I can help you, but you have to trust me." I weighed my options. It felt like a gamble, but the idea of having someone else in this fight was tempting. I texted back, arranging to meet Wraith later that night, just before midnight. When the time finally came, I felt nauseous. I slipped on a hoodie, pulling the drawstrings tight around my face as I stepped outside. The park was just a short walk from my house, but the night air felt thick and suffocating. Each step felt heavy as I made my way down the empty streets, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached the park, I could see shadows dancing under the flickering streetlights. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, and the rustling leaves echoed the anxiety swelling inside me. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and utterly alone in a place that should have been familiar. Wraith was supposed to be waiting by the fountain, a well-known landmark in the park. I reached the open area, glancing around but seeing no one. I pulled my phone out, half expecting a message that they were running late, but there was nothing. The night felt too still, and every rustle made me jump. I took a deep breath and stepped closer to the fountain, the water bubbling gently. That's when I heard it. A soft sound, like footsteps behind me. I spun around, adrenaline flooding my veins. There, in the shadows, was a figure. Not Wraith, but someone else. A chill shot through me as I instinctively took a step back, my heart racing.
"Alex, right?" the figure said, stepping into the light. It was a woman, her face obscured by a hood similar to the one I had seen before, but this time it was pulled down low, hiding her features. "I've been waiting for you." "Who are you?" I managed to stammer, my pulse quickening. "Just someone who knows what you're going through," she replied, her voice smooth but laced with a chilling undertone. "You don't want to be here alone. The others are watching." I backed away slowly, instincts screaming at me to run. "Where's Wraith?" I demanded, searching the shadows for any sign of my supposed ally. "Oh, he's around, just not in a position to help you right now." She stepped closer, and I could see a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "You're playing a dangerous game, Alex. You shouldn't have challenged them." "What do you want?" I shouted, feeling the panic rise in my throat. "I want to help you," she said, tilting her head. "But you have to trust me. The hunters don't play nice, and they will come for you. They'll want a trophy, and you've put yourself right in their sights." My stomach churned at the thought. "I don't want anything to do with this anymore. Just leave me alone." She laughed softly, the sound sending chills down my spine. "It's too late for that. They're already in your head, Alex. You've made yourself a target, and they'll keep coming until they get what they want. You can either fight back or become a victim." I felt trapped, like a rat in a maze with no way out. "What do you know about them?" "I know they're cunning, relentless, and they have eyes everywhere," she replied, her expression serious. "They're not just watching, they're hunting, and they won't stop until they've cornered you. You can't hide." I looked around the park, my heart racing as shadows shifted in the corners of my vision. "What do I do?" I whispered, feeling hopeless. "Meet me again. I'll help you figure out a plan," she said, her voice steady. "But you have to be careful. Don't trust anyone."
Before I could respond, she turned and slipped back into the darkness, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. I was left standing in the park, confusion swirling in my mind like a storm. What had I just gotten myself into? I felt like I was spiraling deeper into a nightmare, and there was no way out. When I finally made my way home, the weight of the encounter pressed heavily on my chest. I needed to figure out who I could trust, but I felt like every move I made only drew me closer to the edge. The following days were a blur of paranoia and dread. I barely left my house, jumping at every noise, convinced that the darkness had crept into every corner of my life. My phone buzzed sporadically, but I hesitated to check, fearing that every notification could be a message from my stalker or even the hunters. I felt like I was spiraling down a rabbit hole that only deepened with each passing hour. I had agreed to meet the mysterious woman again, whom I had come to think of as my reluctant ally, but I was starting to doubt if I could trust her. She hadn't given me her name, and that only added to my unease. Despite my instincts screaming at me to back away, I needed information, and she seemed to have more than I did. The next meeting was set for midnight again, but this time I chose a different location, an abandoned playground that had long since been forgotten. I arrived early, the moon casting eerie shadows across the rusted swings and broken slides. The atmosphere was heavy, the air thick with tension as I paced back and forth, every creak of the playground echoing through the stillness. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, and I felt the weight of the darkness pressing in. I was acutely aware that I was alone, and that sensation clung to me like a second skin. Just when I was about to leave, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was her, but she looked different, her hood down, revealing a face that was both familiar and unsettling. "Sorry I'm late," she said, her voice light, but with an edge that made my skin crawl. Had to make sure I wasn't being followed. I couldn't help but notice how her demeanor had shifted. There was a confidence about her, a self-assuredness that felt wrong. "What do you know about the hunters?" I asked, trying to regain some sense of control. "They're clever," she said, leaning against a slide, arms crossed. "They thrive on fear and chaos, feeding off the weakness of their targets. But they're not invincible. You just need to know how to play their game." "What game?" I pressed. "I'm tired of being part of this. I just want it to stop." "Then you need to confront them. Show them you're not afraid," she urged. "You need to lure them out, make them come to you." The idea was terrifying. "How do I do that?" "Use the information you have. They've been watching you for a reason. If you can get them to think they've won, it'll give you the advantage. You just need to be smart about it."
Her tone suggested that she was more involved in this than I realized, but I brushed it off. "Okay, I'll do it, but I need to know when and where. I can't just wait around." "Tomorrow night," she replied. "We'll draw them out at the coffee shop. Act casual. When they show up, you'll have the element of surprise." I agreed, but a part of me felt like I was being led into a trap. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she had her own agenda, that I was just a pawn in her game. But I was desperate. I needed to take control, and if it meant risking it all, then so be it. The next night, I arrived at the coffee shop earlier than usual, a mix of anxiety and determination coursing through me. The familiar scent of coffee filled the air, but it felt different now, tainted by the knowledge that I was luring something dangerous into the open. I settled into a corner booth, pretending to read a book, my heart racing with anticipation. Minutes dragged on, and I felt the weight of every passing moment. I kept checking my phone, scanning for messages, but nothing came. Then, just as I began to doubt myself, the door swung open, and in walked a group of figures cloaked in dark hoodies. My blood ran cold. They moved like a pack, surveying the room with an air of confidence that sent a chill down my spine. I recognized the leader immediately. It was the same person who had confronted me at the park. They didn't see me, not yet. I could feel my heart thundering in my chest as I prepared to make my move. I took a deep breath and pushed myself up, heading toward the counter as casually as I could manage. The barista greeted me, and I ordered a coffee, my hands trembling slightly. I could see them in my peripheral vision, the group now huddled at a table, exchanging hushed whispers. "Do you have the orders ready?" I overheard the leader say, their voice low and chilling.
My pulse quickened. They were here for a reason, and I needed to find out what it was. I turned slightly, leaning against the counter, pretending to fumble with my phone while trying to listen in. Suddenly, the leader's eyes flicked in my direction. I froze, feeling exposed, but they didn't seem to recognize me yet. I slipped outside, heart racing as I tried to gather my thoughts. As soon as I stepped out, the woman I had met at the playground appeared beside me, her expression unreadable. "You're not ready for this," she said, her voice a low whisper. "You have to leave now." "What do you mean? I need to know what they want." "Trust me," she urged, stepping closer, her presence both comforting and unnerving. You have no idea how dangerous this is. They've been waiting for someone to make a mistake. They'll use you to get to me. In that moment, the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Was she playing me all along? I stepped back, the doubt gnawing at my insides. "What are you not telling me?" Before she could respond, a loud shout echoed from inside the coffee shop. I turned just in time to see the leader storm out, a furious expression on their face. They spotted me, and my heart dropped as I realized I had been cornered. "Alex," the leader called, voice dripping with venom, "we finally have you where we want you." The group poured out of the shop, surrounding us in a menacing formation. Panic surged through me, and I instinctively reached for my phone, but it slipped from my fingers and clattered to the ground. "Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide," the leader sneered, stepping closer. "You thought you could play us. You're nothing but a toy." My mind raced as I scanned for an escape, but the group was closing in, their faces now illuminated by the streetlights. I could feel their eyes on me, calculating and predatory. "Let's show them what happens to little rats that think they can escape," the leader said, a chilling grin spreading across their face. I turned to the woman beside me, desperation in my eyes. "Help me," I pleaded, but she just stepped back, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "Sorry, Alex. You brought this on yourself," she said, and with that, she vanished into the shadows, leaving me alone to face the consequences of my own recklessness. The group lunged at me and instinct kicked in. I darted toward the street, adrenaline pumping through my veins as I sprinted down the sidewalk. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps heavy and relentless. I didn't dare look back. I just ran, my heart pounding louder than ever. I turned down an alley, desperate to lose them in the maze of streets. My lungs burned as I pushed my body to the limit, but the darkness was alive, and I could feel it closing in around me. The sound of their laughter echoed, chilling and haunting, fueling my panic. Just as I thought I was gaining ground, I stumbled and fell, scraping my hands on the pavement. I pushed myself up, ready to run again, but they were closer than I thought. "Get him!" I heard one of them shout. With a surge of fear, I bolted down another alley, darting into the shadows. I could hear them gaining on me, their footsteps echoing in the darkness. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to keep moving. Suddenly, I spotted a door ajar, the faint light spilling out like a beacon. I dashed inside, shutting the door behind me with a forceful shove. The room was empty, filled with old boxes and debris, but I didn't care. I pressed my back against the door, trying to steady my breath, listening as the footsteps approached. "Where did he go?" I heard the leader say, their voice dripping with frustration. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't find me. The sound of their voices grew faint, and for a moment I thought I might escape. But then I heard a crashing sound, the unmistakable thud of something heavy against the door. "Check everywhere," the leader commanded. I was trapped, nowhere to run. I looked around frantically, searching for anything that might help. Just then, I spotted a window at the far end of the room. I knew it would be a tight squeeze, but I had no choice. I sprinted toward it, pushing aside the boxes, and pried it open just as I heard the door give way behind me. They were in the building now, and I could hear them moving around, their voices full of anger and malice. "He can't get away! Find him!" I climbed through the window, my heart racing as I dropped down into the alley outside. I hit the ground hard but didn't stop. I ran blindly into the night, the sounds of my pursuers fading behind me. I didn't stop running until my legs felt like lead, my lungs burning from the effort. I had escaped, but at what cost? I realized then that the dark web had seeped into my life like a poison, and I had put myself in the crosshairs of something much more sinister than I could have ever imagined. With no safe place left, I finally turned to the one option I had avoided for so long. I needed to leave everything behind, cut ties, and start anew. As I made my way home to gather what I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness would always be lurking, waiting for me to slip again. In the end, I learned that some games aren't meant to be played. The darkness knows your name, and once you reveal it, it doesn't forget. It just waits for the right moment to strike again. As I stepped into my house for what I hoped would be the last time, I felt the weight of the shadows behind me, and I knew the nightmare was far from over.